Hello class, today we're going to be completing the Color Theory Mixed Media Assignment Part 2, and in order to do Part 2 you need to have completed the Color Theory Notes Part 2, and just like we started with Part 1, if you haven't put your name on the worksheet yet, make sure you do so. Again, make sure that you write this in pencil, and then the directions are the same as Part 1. You're just going to use the following mediums and the correct color schemes to add color to each fruit below. So with this, our medium now is watercolor. And for box 1, we're going to use analogous colors. We just learned about that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a watercolor pan and brush. So you'll notice the setup similar to what I have going on here on your desk, and we'll talk about that. And then for box 2, you're going to do analogous, but you're going to use watercolor pencils. And so I'll show you what those are like as well. And then moving down the way here, you're also going to use oil pastel today. And for box 1, we only have one box for oil pastel, you're going to use complementary colors. So let's get into talking about your desk setup. So let's just take a quick look at your desk. You'll notice that you have brushes, a watercolor pan set, watercolor colored pencils, which you may actually have to go and get as I'm going to leave those on the back counter, but I've collected a set. And then we've got our water, a sponge that you'll use for your pan watercolors, and then you have a set of oil pastels. This is what you're going to need for the day, and this is how I would like it to be set up when you leave for the day. So minus the watercolor colored pencils. Those you can put back, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about how to do that. Let's take a closer look now at how to use watercolor in order to complete your assignment. So I'm going to shift this off to the side, and I'm going to pull my assignment back out. And for this assignment, it talks about using a watercolor pan and brush set. So I'm going to get started with that first to teach you about how to take care of your watercolor. So with this, when we work with watercolor, you are going to have a set that looks similar to this. I'm just missing my magenta here. But the first thing that you ever want to do with watercolors is you want to check to see if they're contaminated or they're dirty. So if you see something that is contaminated, like for example, this orange has just a tiny bit in there. Some of you may notice green in your yellow, things like that. Here's how you fix that. And it's very, very important that you do it first before you start anything else. Okay? What you're going to do is that you are going to take your bigger brush and you're going to just dip it in your water, and you are going to squeeze a drop or two of water into that circular pan. What you're doing is you're activating the top layer of the watercolor, and watercolor dries in layers, so it only activates the top layers. If you do not necessarily do this process, what's going to happen, if we think about it like a scientist, that water is starting to activate, and now if I just take my brush here and I just mix it in, now I'm going to mix all that red that's on top in with the orange, and now I can no longer fix it. But if I now take my brush and I'm just going to dry it off, here's a fast tip to show you how you can dry your brush, is you can just take the corner, gently roll it over, and gently roll your brush and pull it out, and that kind of gets excess water out. Now that I have that, I've let this sit, and you can see that it's bleeding. If I let it sit longer, that's fine. But now I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to roll it over the top, and it's going to peel up that top layer. So then I'm going to kind of clean that out, rinse my brush. You can also rinse your brush on the sponge, draw a big X on the sponge. That works too. It works better with acrylic paint, but you can also use it for watercolor. So I rinsed out my brush. I'm going to use my corner, get it clean. And then I still have a little bit of red in there, so I'm going to go again, and I'm going to peel that red up. So actually it looks really pretty good now. So if you have that, please take a moment. You can pause the video here, clean your watercolors for a minute, let them soak, let them sit. You can do this multiple times, but as soon as I start mixing or moving around in here, now I've mixed the layers and I can no longer step backwards. So please always check, clean your watercolors before you use them. Next, I need to show you how to actually mix the colors. Now that we know how to clean them, now we need to know how to mix them. So with your watercolor set pan, you also have the actual mixing pan. So please keep these separate. We used to have them inside, but I just discovered over time just to keep these separate because not all the time do you need to mix. Sometimes you can just go directly from the pan to the paper or whatever it is that you are using watercolor for. But if you do need to mix, these pans are great. Here's how you do it. You're just going to take some water on your big brush, and you are going to put a puddle of water into the pan. And I'm going to maybe make 2 puddles here. And then you need to activate your watercolors. Just like I showed you with cleaning it, you're just going to take a couple droplets from your big brush and you're going to squeeze those droplets into the pans to activate your water. Now, if we're doing analogous color schemes, really you should only have to activate 2 of them that are next to each other because we're going to mix that tertiary color between them. So if I have my red activated and my orange activated, I'm also going to be mixing what is known as red-orange. So now that I have that, I'm going to start taking some of this red pigment, and yours, it just might take a little bit longer. Mine's been sitting here with some water on it, but if you need to, let it sit for a minute and then you can grab more. So the more pigment I have and less water, okay, the brighter the color. I'm going to say that again. The more pigment and less water, okay, kind of more bright or saturated it's going to look. However, if I add more water, okay, and less pigment, okay, that's going to make it look as we would normally think of watercolor. It's going to be very light and very transparent and watery. Okay, so I mixed just kind of a nice red here, and I like that color. I'm just going to rinse out my brush, draw a big X on SpongeBob, and put that off to the side. My paper is not very big, so I'm going to use my smaller brush now, and you can either get it wet or you can use dry brush technique. It's kind of what it's called. You use dry brush, wet paint. And I'm going to go through and start brushing on my colors for our assignment. So with that, I maybe will decide that I want all of the seeds to be red. Great. You'll notice when I went to go paint that, these were a little bit lighter than I maybe wanted them to be. I could dip just directly into the pan because I'm not mixing any colors here, but I have a lot on there, so don't be afraid to dab off on your paper towel if you need to. The idea here is that you don't want to overflow or overfill some of your areas. If you accidentally do that, which it happens, for example, I have a little extra up here. Some artists like to just take a paper towel and blot it, and what that means is that you just press down where they're at. But if you're using some of those colors like yellow and green, okay, this is going to be a lot harder. So I'm just gently pressing down, and you'll notice that it kind of bleeds out. So sometimes artists don't like how that looks, and they just don't like the lack of control that it gives them, right? Because it's kind of challenging. So for me, it doesn't necessarily matter too much because I'm going to be putting a red-orange in there, and it doesn't bother me. So let's get into, that's how you would fix if you just have a little bit of excess water. Another technique, let's just finish that out. You could actually clean out your brush. And just like how we cleaned our palette, you could dry it off, and then you could soak up like a sponge all that extra color. It also helps if you need to lighten an area. That's how you would do it. So I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can hopefully see a little bit better what's happening. So if I, for instance, wanted to lighten up one of these seeds, it got too dark, I can take a little extra water, kind of saturate it for a minute, dry off my brush, and then soak up that pigment. So that's how you can make it lighter or darker when working with watercolor. Kind of cool, kind of neat. It's a little bit hard to see in the video, but there's a definite difference here on the paper. But now let's get into talking about how do I actually mix colors, Miss Souther. Okay, so I have my red already here. I'm going to take my orange next, so I need to clean out my brush. And I'm going to take a little orange here, mix it over here. And that actually is probably pretty good. So now I'm going to take my tiny brush, and I'm going to take from my palette, not from here. Okay, I'm just going to take from my palette, and I'm going to mix some red into my orange. And honestly, what's going to happen is both of these are going to turn into red-orange, and that's okay. You could change that up or just add another water puddle if you need to. But you can kind of decide, okay, which one do I maybe like better? I really like how this one's turning out over here. So I'm going to use this one. And now it's time to take this red orange and fill in another section of my project. So this is how you do your mixing. You mix over here in the paint pan. You do not mix in your actual watercolor colors pan. So now I'm gonna just finish out my project and my assignment, and that's what you need to know in order to complete the pan and brush. So I'm gonna put this off to the side now because we need to talk about the watercolor pencils. So when working with watercolor pencils, they look like so. They look like regular colored pencils, but they are not. So please, please, please do not put these in the regular colored pencil bins. Also, please be very careful with these when you're sharpening them. Essentially what they've done is they've taken these pan watercolors and they made them into a stick form. So they're very, very soft. If you shove them into the sharpener, you're gonna basically tear through the entire pencil super easily. So be careful with them. How these work, you can use them in two ways. You can either color like you would color regularly with a colored pencil, and then you can take a brush and you can paint over the top to make it bleed. That's not my favorite technique, mainly because it has to sit for like 24 hours before you can actually see it bleed together. Instead, what I like to do is actually dip the tip of the pencil into the water and then let it activate and then color with it. And that gives me a lot more control and I can see the results a lot faster. So with that in mind, when you go to pick up your pencils, yes, I took the time to go through the bin and find red, orange, and orange, but honestly, you really just need red and orange, and then you can do like how we've done color mixing before on our color theory worksheet, and you can put the red down and then put the orange down over the top. Okay, either one. We're gonna try both, but just so you guys can actually see this in a demonstration, I'm gonna dip my pencil, okay, just into the water, and you'll notice that I'm gonna let it sit here. It's gonna activate. And then I'm going to start putting it on my paper. So here we go. Oh, I'm gonna slide this over. And same thing, you could put the same colors in the same place, but you'll begin to notice a lot more control and a lot more pigment with these watercolor colored pencils. So for some students, they really like a combination of both. They'll use the watercolor pan sets for a background of a project, and then they'll use the watercolor colored pencils to add details or to refine their work. But it's fun to explore both and see which one you prefer. So as you can see, this is how you would go ahead and use your watercolor colored pencil. When you go to do mixing, I just talked about it, but again to review, I could take my red, put it down, try and put it down lightly. You'll notice that when it's not working, because it looks like colored pencil, so do you see the difference there? That's the watercolor that you're looking for. That's a little less. So I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more water. I'm gonna let it activate, kind of lightly put it on there. There we go. And then before it dries too much, I'm going to switch to my orange. If you happen to find the red orange, you could just use the red orange. If you want to experiment a little further with your mixing capabilities, now I'm going through with my orange and layering over the top to make the red orange. Again, neatness is key here, so don't rush it. You might have to wait, like my orange is taking a little bit longer than my red to activate. It's leaving some of these streaky marks. We want to get it to blend, okay? All right, so that shows you both examples, how to use a watercolor pan and brush and how to use the watercolor colored pencils. It's now up to you to go through and finish out an analogous color scheme, 3 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, to complete this assignment. Next, we are moving on to oil pastel, and we're going to use complementary colors. Let's take a look now at the bottom of the mixed media assignment part 2, looking at the oil pastel. And for this one, we're going to use complementary colors. So with complementary colors and working with oil pastel, just to demonstrate how to work with oil pastel, I kind of have a blob here of red, so automatically I'm going to use red, and my complement is going to be green to fill this one in, because complementary colors are across from each other on the color wheel. But let's talk about how to work with oil pastels. This red oil pastel is coated with yucky green and yellow residue. If I use this, I'm going to smear and then I'm going to get extra colors, and then I'll get a lower grade because I'll have these extra colors in there that don't represent a complementary color scheme. So how you actually clean oil pastels is you can do it one of two ways. You can either sit here and you can scratch and try and hit the mark on where the dirty spots are. Or my preferred method is I actually take the paper towel and just rub it over the area that is dirty. So I'm just kind of wiping it off and cleaning it to make it a nice bright red. Then you can always check your color on your paper towel, draw with it, and if it's clean, then you're good to go. So when we're working with these oil pastels, we also want to look at blending. So if you blend with complementary colors, you're going to get brown. Okay, we would like to avoid brown generally, but in this exercise, I think it would be kind of unique to actually see you experiment with that and see what happens when you mix your complementary colors together. So one section of your area here, I want to see the brown that you make with your complementary colors. So just one section, okay? I don't want to have more than one section, just one section. So with that, if you want to practice mixing, I can take my red, and you can do heavy pressure blending where I'm pressing hard. I'm checking my green, it looks good. And then you can do the green and heavy pressure blend. Notice that I went off to the side and I didn't just start over the top of the red. When you're mixing with oil pastel, you actually want to start away from it and blend into it. Okay, so that's what a heavy pressure blend looks like. Okay, now I have red on there, so I gotta clean it off. You can also do a light pressure blend where you just press lightly. So it's gonna look a lot more like crayon when you work with a light pressure blend. Ooh, say that 10 times. But either is fine by me with this exercise. I prefer the solid one. I think that looks way nicer, but you can choose either light or heavy pressure blending to complete your complementary color assignment. Again, only one section, you choose where it's going to be at, needs to be this mixing, but the rest of them, I'd like them to be nice and neat and tidy, either red or green or whatever your color combination is. And that's how you work with oil pastels. The end of the hour, you're going to get rid of the old paper towel and you're going to grab a new one. And you can put your colors. We always practice our rainbows in art class. So you can set it up rainbow order, Roy G. Biv, and then it's ready to go for the next student. Let's talk about cleanup here for watercolor. I absolutely love watercolor because it is so easy to clean up. So when it's time to clean up for us, you're just going to gently put your pan off to the side, and so long as it's not messy, like mine's not dirty, you can just set it to the side here. This lovely watercolor pan set and your brushes, as well as your dirty water, you're going to just take it to the sink. All you need to do is rinse it with water. Dry off the pan, please. So don't leave the pan just dripping wet. That's kind of leaves residue of the paint on the pan, and then whoever goes to mix next on it will have your paint colors mixed in there. So make sure you dry it just gently with a paper towel. And then the watercolor pencils, please just try and dry them off a little bit. I know it's kind of hard to do that, but you can just kind of run them gently along your paper towel. I'm not pressing very hard here. I'm just rolling it and gently bringing it down the paper towel just to dry it off a little bit. And then now I'm going to go back and put these back into the correct containers so that they're ready to go for the next student. And then after I've done that, this paper towel, it's dirty. It needs to go in the garbage. So you're going to take that to the garbage. You're going to grab 2 fresh ones. Okay, please grab 2 of them, open them up. This is what a clean desk area looks like. I've got my paint pan here. I've dried it. I'm going to close it up. My watercolors are nice and clean. My brushes are cleaned out. The water ran clear. For my water jug here, I've cleaned out the water. It's nice and clear. My sponge is cleaned out. And I've got my oil pastels nice and neatly lined up, rainbow order, on the desk. And my paper towel is clean. Notice this is a clean paper towel. Don't leave them your dirty paper towel from your activity. Please make sure it's nice and neat, organized for the next class.